Funding for this program is provided by Bruce Foods Corporation, makers of the complete line of Cajun King seafood seasoning mixes and other distinctive Louisiana-style food products.
Louisiana. Hello, I'm Chef John Folse, welcoming you to this great state of ours. We're real proud of our people, places, and food, and I'd like for you to know a little bit more about it. So join me and some of my friends as we visit the historical food towns of this state and cook up another great Taste of Louisiana. Everybody, and welcome to A Taste of Louisiana. I'm Chef John Folse, and I want to thank you for stopping by the kitchen as we continue to visit the great historical food towns of Louisiana. Today we're going to the northwest corner of our state, to Webster Parish, and to the town of Minden. Minden was actually founded in about 1840 by a gentleman with the name of Charles Veeder. And here's the entranceway right into the city. Here you see this nice big boulevard. And I tell you, it's one of the great old towns of our state. Here, the brick streets right down the center of the city, and these streets were actually laid in about 1920. The First Methodist Church, just think of the architecture in these little bitty towns. This here is the Drake home. It's on the National Register of Historic Places, and it always amazes me when I see the size of the buildings here. This is the Webster Parish Library. It was also a private residence until it was taken over as a library, and the town has now outgrown this beautiful old building, and they're looking to build a new one. What a shame. This is Dorcheat Bayou, and the original settlement of Minden, which was called Overtown, was actually founded right here on Dorcheat Bayou. However, an epidemic came and wiped out the entire settlement, so Mr. Veeder had to move the town up on the hill. Right outside of Minden is Germantown, and this is one of the great German settlements that sprouted up all over the United States, not only here in Louisiana. And this town was more of a socialist town, as a lot of the German communities were. The men and women and children all shared in the daily chores and manufacturing, gardening, whatever it took to make this village survive. This village was founded in about 1840, and it was founded by the Count Leon, and he never really made it to the city. He left the Pittsburgh settlement with his wife, Countess Leon, and came to Louisiana. However, he died before they made it here. She actually taught piano lessons right here on this old square piano, and there's a lot of artifacts from that original German settlement right here. You see this old wallpaper? This was original, brought with them from Germany. A lot of great artwork in the village, and all these paintings are available right there for you to take a look at. What a beautiful little town. I tell you, I spent a great day right in the Germantown settlement. We also had them in South Louisiana, and I'm sure you have German settlements all over in your own hometowns as we cross America. One of the things about German communities, though, is the great German food that they present on those tables. I can only imagine sitting around one of those big tables of sauerkraut and sauerbraten, and guess what? We're going to actually do both of those dishes today. Visiting with me a little bit later in the kitchen is a good friend of mine from the town of Minden. He's a real estate agent, but Richard Carey knows a lot about brewing beer. That's right, German beer, American beer, all kinds of beer, and nothing is better with German food than beer. So Richard's going to be here just a little bit later to visit with me. Let's talk about Sauerbraten. Sauerbraten is sweet and sour pot roast, basically. And look on this nice big old platter what I have here. I have a nice top round of beef, and in Sauerbraten, the original recipe, you would always start with this nice chunk of meat marinated for about 3 days in red wine vinegar. However, in Louisiana, we like to cube the beef as we do in jambalaya and marinate it the same way. I think it goes a little bit longer, and of course it covers those noodles a little bit better than the pot roast. But Sauerbraten was always made roast style in the early days. To make Sauerbraten, you not only need the top round of beef and the cube beef, but you need carrots and you need ginger and cloves, all those nice German spices. The way we begin is to take a nice bowl, and I've already put into this bowl right here about a cup of red wine vinegar. That's where the sour comes from. Of course, you could use red wine, a little touch of red wine, or even different variations, whatever you would like. But I'm going to put into that bowl my cubed little pieces of beef here, and once it all goes into the bowl, you can imagine that the beef would instantly start to pick up that nice sour flavor. I'm also going to put carrots, because that's where the nice sweetness will come from, and then some bay leaves and lemons go right down into the bowl as well. Now for the spice. I'm going to add some whole peppercorns, and of course you can use green, white, the multicolored peppercorns as well. Here we have cloves, and you want to sprinkle a nice little amount of cloves down into there. Again, some of the more aromatic spices. Brown sugar for that nice sweet taste to the vinegar. That's, again, Sauerbrat and sweet and sour roast. And then ginger. Now, I would just leave this just about the way it is once it starts to marinate if I was from Germany. But since I'm from the bayous of Louisiana, and the people of Minden would also continue to flavor this with, of course, a little onions down into the bowl, a little celery, and, of course, a nice touch of garlic. And we would allow this to marinate for, see, I'm going to get my hands down in there and mix it all up. You can imagine how all these great flavors are going to start to come together. Once this marinates for about 8 hours, I would say, in a refrigerator, Sauerbrat normally marinates for 72 hours. Can you imagine that? That's how long it takes to get the flavor into that roast. But since this is cubed, I won't let it marinate quite that long. Probably about 8 hours would be enough. You may even want to marinate it a little less if you like a little less of the sour taste. Now I'm going to move the bowl over to my black iron pot, and I'm going to take all of the meat. Let's say this has been marinating for a couple of hours with all of the flavors. Boy, look at that. Woo. I wish you could smell this as it goes into that pot. All of those great, great flavors. Now I would allow that to saute until the meat is nice and brown. I want to stir that around for just a second. Oh, look at that. I wish you could smell that sweetness in that vinegar flavor coming out of the pot with all of these nice sweet herbs, the cloves, and that wonderful ginger that went down into the pot. I would allow this now to saute for, about 20 minutes or so until it gets nice and golden brown. Once it becomes golden brown and most of the juices have been rendered, I'm going to take the marinade, the vinegar and the sugar. I'm going to pour it down into the pot. We're going to assume that this has been cooking for about a half hour or so, and then a little more liquid. You can add water, but I'm going to add a little bit beef stock. Always add a little bit beef stock if you have it around, but feel free to go ahead and add a little bit water to it. Now, once this cooks for about an hour and a half, the Sauerbraten will be nice and tender. Of course, all the flavors of the sweet and sour will come together. You can garnish with a little bit of the green onions if you'd like, and you can even kind of season it up with a little Louisiana hot sauce down into the pot. Once it's nice and tender, you remove the meat and do as the Germans did. Leave the marinade and the sauce down into the pot and thicken it with a little bit cracked ginger snaps. That's right, cookies. Ginger snaps and raisins is where the thickening comes from in the pot, unlike the Cajun roux. I've got some of this already done naturally, and I want to show you what it looks like once it all goes down into the noodles, onto the noodles. Let me get this pot out of the way. And, well, I tell you, I want you to take a look at this pot right here of the Sauerbraten that Countess Leon would have cooked a nice big pot of. And I'm going to put it on top of this beautiful platter. Well, take a look at that gorgeous platter right there. I'm going to take this, and I'm going to put some of those nice noodles, some of the nice Sauerbraten right on top of the noodles. And you can imagine how nice the flavor of this is going to be with the ginger snaps and the raisins and all of the vegetables down right on top of these noodles. Use any pasta that you would like. And that's basically it. You can garnish it, of course, with a little bit more of the reds and the yellow peppers, any of those pretty, pretty colors that I like to use whenever I garnish anything. And take a look at this. That's what the dish looks like when it's all done. Serve a big platter of Sauerbraten at your own home. You're going to love it. Okay, I need to get this pot out of the way, and I want to do what I consider to be the #1 dish in all of German cooking, and you know what that is. That dish has got to be sauerkraut. Take a look at that big old platter of cabbage and meats. Now, you know, sauerkraut is basically cabbage that has been put into a crock and layered with salt, and then a little weight put on top of it, and all of the natural juices of the cabbage start to actually come out as the cabbage begins to ferment. Of course, I know what you're thinking. Who likes sauerkraut? Sauerkraut is one of the greatest dishes in the world if it's done properly. It's a great dish. Once the sauerkraut is fermented, of course, you can get it in cans and in jars. Just get a really good quality sauerkraut, put it in a colander, and wash it with a lot of nice cold water. 2 or 3 really good washings if you want to get most of the sourness out, or just one nice rinse if you want to keep it in. Squeeze out all of that excess moisture, and then the secret to good sauerkraut is the meat that you would use to cook it with, and that can be just about anything. Here, let's take a look at about 3 or 4 of the meats that I would like to use. Here we have bratwurst, the German sausages. We have the white, we have the smoked, and of course we have the fresh right here in the middle. In Louisiana, the Germans would have certainly put the andouille sausage, which is the Cajun ham inside of the casing. Really, really nice ham. Take a look at that. And then, of course, a good quality smoked sausage would work well also. Most sauerkraut dishes will always have some smoked pork chops or smoked ham of some type, and even smoked tongue goes well in this particular dish. And then in Louisiana, we would add a little tasso, because this came over with the Germans. The tasso is the smoked meat, little bitty piece of meat that's flavored with garlic and cayenne pepper. So all of these great smoked meats will go into the sauerkraut pot to really make a wonderful German dish that's renowned all over the world, not only here in the town of Minden or Germantown. Let me put it together for you. Again, of course, I'm going to use my little black iron pot here. And what I'll do is to take the sauerkraut and put it down into the bottom of the pot. Now, you want to spread it out. This sauerkraut has been rinsed about 2 or 3 times. I want to get out a lot of the sour flavor because I'm going to steep it in beer. So once all sauerkraut is down into the bottom of the pot like this, spread it out real, give it some room down into the bottom of that pot. Then I would add some onions, and of course I'm using red onions because sauerkraut, you know, you need to add a little color to it. So put a little red onions, sprinkle all around here. You want to layer all of this too. I know some of my German friends like to put a layer of the sauerkraut and then a layer of the meat and the onions and the sausages, but I'll go ahead and just kind of put the sauerkraut on the bottom, then the onions, and then the meats. Of course, I'll line up all of the light meats together so that it makes a really nice presentation. Then the sausages. Look how pretty this thing is once it comes together. The smoked pork chops. And then, of course, the tasso. Look at all the great smoked meats, if you can imagine that. And I'll even put the brats, because that had to come over from Germany. And then some red peppers for color. And again, you can use whatever flavors you would want into this dish. You could put some garlic in here, onions, celery, bell pepper, whatever you would like. Put your own flavors into it, but you have to put a little bit pickling spice, and pickling spice you can find in any of the little spice racks in the stores. It's got all these nice aromatic spices. Of course, again, cloves, because this is German cooking. We want a little bit cloves. And then for spice, the peppercorns. I'm going to use the colored peppercorns. There's green, black, red, pink, all the different colors here. I'm going to put those right down into the pot. And then the secret ingredient to good sauerkraut, beer. You have to put a little beer. Some people put wine, and of course some people will just make it with water or stock. But hey, sauerkraut, come on, let's put a little beer in that pot. Even mix a little beer or wine. I would put the lid on this and bring it to a rolling boil and then cut it to simmer, and I would allow this sauerkraut to simmer for about an hour and a half, because during that hour and a half, the beer will really tenderize the sauerkraut, pick up all of that great flavor, but the smoked meats will add all of their own identity to the bottom of this pot, and you cannot imagine what this dish is going to look like or taste like once those smoked andouilles and brats and all that ham comes together in the bottom of the pot. Just a wonderful, wonderful dish. So I want to show you what one of them already looks like. If we can take a look down into my black iron pot over here. And this black iron pot has all of the sausages, as you can see, the brats and the andouilles and the smoked meats. And what I would do with this particular dish, I would take it and put it on a really nice big platter, the sauerkraut right in the middle, and then all of the smoked meats all around the outside of the dish. It makes a beautiful presentation. And I first tasted this dish with a great old friend of mine, Mrs. Olga Hirsch from the town of Donaldsonville, who showed me how to do this because she was from Alsace-Lorraine. And she said, John, this is the best dish you'll ever eat if you do it right. And I tell you, Olga Hirsch, I've been doing it right ever since. It's a great dish. Now, what will we serve with this? Well, let me see. Here's a nice big platter. This is ring bologna. And the ring bologna is surrounded by a German potato salad, hot German potato salad, very easy to make. Every cookbook has a sample of that dish. So, of course, go ahead and pick one up and do the German potato salad. And then here we have the strudel, a really, really nice apple strudel. Of course, you can make strudels with any type of filling, and this is just an apple. So, nice dessert for a German dinner. Okay, I told you that my good buddy Richard Carey would be here to visit with me in just a little while, and Richard is, hey, there's Richard. How you doing?
Home?
Great to see you. How you doing?
John.
Hey, what do you have here?
Well, you know, when you were at my house the other day, you admired my collection of beer crews.
Right.
So I brought you this one. I thought you'd like to have that for your collection.
Boy, this is absolutely beautiful. This is a very, very old one, huh?
It's about 100 years old.
And now there's a name inscribed right on the top here. That was very typical of the early Krugs, right?
Right. That's the name of the person who actually owned that beer Krug, and it's a lady in this case. And when she went to her favorite beer hall, she would leave her beer Krug at that beer hall, and they would lock it up for her. And then whenever she came, they'd present it to her.
Now, is this the same thing as a stein?
It's basically the same thing. People call these steins, but a stein is actually stoneware. Stein is the German word for stone.
And so when we see these really nice ornate stoneware steins, that's what it is as opposed to the Krug.
You can call this a stein, and it's just as proper.
Now, really, which one is used the most to drink beer in Europe? Is it the decorative stein or the Krug?
No, they use primarily nowadays they use the non-decorative stoneware beer steins.
I'll tell you, I really appreciate this because you have one of the most unbelievable collections of beer steins. Naturally, you're a beer maker, so you would. But I tell you, I could have walked out of your house if you'd have turned your back from me with a couple of. I appreciate this so much, and I'm going to put this in the right spot. Richard, you know, someone was telling me not so long ago that settlements as we know them today, towns and villages, actually sprouted up and owe their existence to beer. And I was thinking, now, you know, every settlement in the world actually came about because of beer making. Is that true, or why is that?
There's a lot of people who do believe that, John. In the early days, you know, beer dates back 4,000 years at least, maybe 5,000 years. They've discovered beer recipes in Samaria, Mesopotamia, various places, and they think that some of these nomadic tribes, when they were moving around, would have to stop for long enough to make beer because beer was used in commerce at that time. And it takes a month or two to make a batch of beer, or it did at that time. So that would sit them in place for a month or two. When they moved on to their next place, sometimes some people would stay, and that became a settlement.
So actually then, they also told me that water was often not able, you couldn't find it, the oasis was dried up, or actually that the water was contaminated. So beer making, they knew if they had a big cask of beer with them that obviously they could live a couple weeks longer. So settlements would have been.
That's very possible. Yeah.
I walked into your basement. See, I was all over you. I walked into your basement, and here was all these apparatuses going on. You know, when I think of beer making, I think of wine making at home. I have these visions of these federal officers coming in with the axes and breaking up the stills. Does that happen, or is it legal? I mean, tell me about this. How do we make beer in home? Is it legal?
Well, Elliot Ness is not looking for us now. The federal government allows you to make up to 200 gallons a year for your own consumption. You can't sell it, but you can make 200 gallons a year for your own use.
You personally, I mean, how did you get into it? I mean, I know there's a lot to it. How did you get into it yourself?
A long time ago, back in the 50s, I worked overseas. I worked in Saudi Arabia, which has total prohibition. And everyone over there, all the Americans who worked over there, tried to make their own beer or whatever.
Here's those Americans again.
That's right, that's right. Where there's a will, there's a way. And at that time, in the 50s, there were no beer kits. It was hard to make. You didn't have the right yeast. You didn't have the right materials. So we never were successful. And I pretty much forgot about it until I came home, and 7 or 8 years ago, I discovered that there were beer kits available, and there was an association to help people make beer.
Is there a lot of that going on around the country? A lot of people making beer?
Oh, yeah. The American Homebrewers Association has more than 13,000 members, and there's probably 3 times that many people who brew who are not a member of the association.
Well, you know, I'm thinking of our Chefs Association. We have about 18,000 members of professional chefs in the United States. There's 13,000 members of the Homebrewers Association. But I tell you, our chefs better get on. There's more beer makers than there are cooks, right?
Oh, yeah, and it's growing by leaps and bounds.
Is it difficult to make beer? I mean, if I wanted to learn how to make beer, can you teach me quickly?
Oh, John, there's nothing to it. In fact, I brought everything that we need to make a batch of beer right here. It's on your kitchen table.
Is that right? Well, let's take a look at it and see how you make it. Hey, I might just get started today, right?
Sounds good.
Boy, I tell you, this looks like some mad scientist's laboratory. Is this really this complicated? Is this what it's all about?
Well, no, there's actually nothing to it. There are only four things that go into beer, and that's a grain, primarily barley or wheat, hops, yeast, and water.
Well, you know, I notice here you've got two cans. Now, what exactly is in here?
This is malted barley that has been boiled and reduced down to a syrup, and it's a syrup just about like sorghum syrup,
right?
Or sugarcane syrup. And this with hops and yeast and water are all that you need to make beer. You can put this kit right here into 5 gallons of water, boil it for an hour with hops in it, cool it down, add yeast, wait a week, and then bottle it, and 3 weeks later you have good beer.
Is that it? That's all to it?
Nothing to it.
Now, I noticed that there's 2 different cans here, so there's 2 different kits that we have right here on the table. Is this basically what's available?
There are literally hundreds of different beer kits made by no telling how many different makers.
So if a guy likes a particular type of beer, he could actually, or she could actually buy the can or just a simple kit that would make the beer that they personally like.
That's right. You can buy any particular type of beer that you want.
Now, you mentioned grains, you mentioned all that. Sounds a little complicated, but obviously I can just take this, open it up, pour it into a pot of boiling water, boil it for a couple hours, and I have beer.
That's true.
Let's look at a couple of these things on the table, because I see that you have some things here that I'm not quite familiar with. What do you have?
This is malted barley, which is barley that has been allowed to sprout. It's been moistened and sprouted and then toasted. If it's toasted very lightly, it makes a light beer. If it's toasted a little bit more, it makes a darker beer. If it's toasted to where it's almost burnt, it makes a real dark beer like stout.
Now, someone told me that they actually put this on the floor and wet it. This is barley, so they would wet it and allow it to sprout. And then right when the little sprouts are on, they would put it in an oven and bake it?
That's right.
What's the reason for that?
Well, when they sprout it, that allows the enzymes to be released, and it makes the natural sugars that are in the barley be released. And when you boil this grain, basically when you boil it in water, it produces the sugar, or it releases the sugar that's in the barley. Then when you put the yeast in it, the yeast in with that sugar makes alcohol and CO2.
Now, you also have this powder here. But you're telling me this is a concentrate of some
This
sort.
is a concentrate of the malted barley. This is where they take it and reduce it down to a powder. Then this is also the same thing.
So this is actually the cracked barley that's then made into a powdered form, like flour.
That's right.
And it's got everything in it that's, again, you could just dump this in the place of the grain.
You can brew with this, or this.
Now, of course, I know that everybody in the world is probably confused with hops. Of course, I've heard the word hops quite a bit. I have no idea what are hops. And this is hops here, right?
This is pelletized hops. The hops vine is a vine that grows about 20 feet tall and produces a bud or a flower that is very bitter. And when they take that flour, they compress it down and they make these pellets out of it, simply for the ease of use of homebrewers.
Now, this just grows on a vine. These are available, these grow here in the United States?
They grow in Oregon. They make wonderful hops, the best hops in the world in Oregon.
But someone was telling me that the best hops, though, actually come from Germany. Is that because that's basically where beer was...
That's not necessarily true. Some of the German brewers are importing American hop for some of their beers.
Is that right?
That's right.
So bad information, right? Now, if I take this and pour a little yeast, because I see you have a packet of yeast here. Now, if I go into the store and pick up a package of yeast right off of the shelf, I can make beer.
You can make a type of beer, but it's not going to be a pure yeast like this. This is a specific beer yeast, and that's what you need if you're going to make beer.
So, so this would actually come in a kit, or would I buy this also?
It does come with a kit, but it's a lot better if you buy separate yeast, and there are lot of stores, just about every major town has a store that sells home brewing supplies.
Okay, so once I have all of this, I notice that you have this big bottle, so everything goes. Tell me a little bit about how it gets to this.
This is after I have boiled it with the hops, and I cool it down, and I put it in this and add yeast. I have to cool it down to about 70 degrees. You can see it bubbling. It's producing, right now, it's producing alcohol and CO2. As it produces that, it bubbles off. After it works completely down to where it produces no more CO2, the yeast becomes dormant. I let it stay there for a couple of days. Then I prime it again with just a little bit of sugar, and I bottle it, or else I put it up in these kegs, which is really a lot easier.
And now, this would actually be the finished product once you add the yeast. This is done. It's ready to be bottled.
Yeah. Once this sits here and becomes dormant, it'll settle out and become very clear and a lot lighter than it is right now.
Is there a difference between this beer and the commercial beers that you buy in the stores?
Oh yeah, there's a great difference. This beer that homebrewers make is still a live beer. It has live yeast in the bottle or in the keg, whereas commercial beer has been cold filtered or pasteurized and the yeast has been removed or killed. So that beer will last indefinitely, whereas homebrew, being a live yeast, needs to be drunk fairly soon.
Well, you know, I noticed the thing is just sitting here and bubbling away, so it's pretty active.
It's still going. This has only been going since Saturday.
Now, is there a ritual? I know with champagne, you put it in a nice crystal glass. Is there a ritual to drinking beer?
Well, there's a different type of glass or mug or stein for just about every type of beer. We have the Pilsner glass that everybody's familiar with, the German glass. This is the British pub glass that holds a full 16 ounces, holds a pint. They're very sincere about giving you full measure.
Great. Well, Richard, look, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you coming and visiting with me, showing me how to make beer. And hey, and I'm going to actually do some of this just to say I can do it.
Right.
But why don't you go ahead and pour us each one, and we're going to see if this is any good. Put it in there. And I tell you, I want to tell you how much I appreciate you coming to visit with us. And come on back as we continue to cook up more of these great Taste of Louisiana. We're going to sample some of Richard's beer a little later with that sauerkraut. See you later.
Funding for this program was provided in part by Bruce Foods Corporation, makers of Bruce's Yams and other distinctive Louisiana-style food products.
This is PBS.
The companion cookbook to A Taste of Louisiana is available for $22.95. The Evolution of Cajun and Creole Cuisine by Chef John Folse features recipes and food history behind Louisiana's cuisine. This 352-page cookbook contains over 250 recipes, including those from this show. To order, call 1-800-973-7246 or write to the address on your screen.